Sometime in the next 12 months, you are going to walk into a grocery store, and the price of beef will be higher than it has ever been in your life. So will chicken. So will eggs. So will milk. And almost no cable news anchor is going to tell you why. The news tell you it's inflation, or interest rates, or a bad harvest. Those answers will be wrong. The real answer is that earlier this spring, a Greek-owned tanker carrying 50,000 tons of fertilizer stopped moving and never started again. But the real value of that ship is not the fertilizer in its hold. It is what that fertilizer was supposed to become. It was supposed to become corn in Iowa, soybeans in Mato Grosso, wheat in the Punjab, sugar in Maharashtra. It was supposed to become the food that helps feed people on 4 continents, and the meat, eggs, and dairy that millions of Americans buy without ever thinking about where it comes from. It is not going to. And the consequences of that, the consequences that almost nobody is talking about, are about to arrive at your door. If you have watched any cable news in the last 6 weeks, you already know the headline version of this story. On February 28th, the United States and Israel attacked Iran. Iran responded by closing the Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile wide stretch of water between Iran and Oman that most Americans would struggle to find on a map. About 20% of the world's seaborne oil and a similar share of liquefied natural gas normally pass through this single choke point. When it closed, oil prices did what oil prices do. Brent crude shot above $100 a barrel for the first time in 4 years. By mid-March, it touched 126. The International Energy Agency called it the largest disruption to the global oil market in history. Larger than 1973, larger than 1979, larger than the invasion of Kuwait. And so, predictably, the coverage has been about gas pumps, about airline tickets, about the cost of filling up your car. That coverage is not wrong, it is just not the most important part. And it is not the part that's going to outlast the news cycle and follow you home. I have spent the last 15 years working in supply chain and logistics. And one of the first things you learn in this field is that the things that move quietly are usually more important than the things that move loudly. Because the loud things are the ones we watch, and the quiet ones are the ones that actually reach your kitchen. Oil moves loudly. Oil has CEOs and analysts and a price ticker that runs across every business channel in the world. When oil moves, everyone sees it. And within a week, the gas pump tells you the rest. Fertilizer does not move loudly. There is no fertilizer ticker. There is no fertilizer pundit on cable news. The chemical name for the most important agricultural input on Earth, urea, is the kind of word that makes people's eyes glaze over. And that's exactly why nobody is going to connect it to the price of your groceries 6 months from now, unless someone tells you the connection ahead of time. About 1/3 of all the fertilizer that moves across oceans on this planet passes through the Strait of Hormuz. 46% of all internationally traded urea originates from the Gulf region. Nearly half of the world's seaborne sulfur, a key fertilizer ingredient, also moves through the same 21 miles of water. So here's what this video is really about. The Strait of Hormuz is not really an oil choke point. It is a food choke point that also happens to carry oil. And the consequences of closing it, the ones that don't make cable news, are about to walk into your house, sit down at your dinner table, and not leave for a year. To understand why this matters, you have to understand a piece of agricultural biology that most people never think about. Roughly half of all the calories that humans on Earth consume, half, are made possible by synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. Without it, the global population would collapse to somewhere around 3 to 4 billion people. The other 4 billion of us are alive because, in 1909, 2 German chemists figured out how to pull nitrogen out of the air using natural gas. That process is called Haber-Bosch. It is, depending on how you count, either the most important invention of the 20th century or the most underrated one. It uses about 2% of the world's energy, and it requires natural gas. The Persian Gulf has a lot of natural gas. Qatar alone produces enough liquefied natural gas to keep large parts of Asia and Europe powered. That gas does two things. It generates electricity, and it is the raw feedstock for nitrogen fertilizer. When the strait closed, both stopped at once. Natural gas production in the region dropped by 20%. Prices rose by as much as 70%. And because natural gas is 70 to 90% of the cost of producing nitrogen fertilizer, fertilizer prices in the United States rose more than 40% in a single month. And the timing could not be worse. In the Northern Hemisphere, planting season runs from late March through early June. Corn farmers in Iowa apply fertilizer in 3 pulses: in March before planting, in mid-April during early growth, and again in late May. Miss any of those windows and the corn does not grow back. There is no rescheduling a harvest. By mid-March 2026, US fertilizer supply was at 75% of normal. Farmers facing those shortages did exactly what economic logic told them to do. They planted less corn. They switched to soybeans, which need less nitrogen. Some left fields empty. Which means the consequences of what is happening in the Persian Gulf right now will arrive in your grocery store in late 2026 and through all of 2027. Not as a bag of fertilizer, but as the price of beef, chicken, eggs, and dairy. Because corn is what those animals eat. But Americans are not where this crisis lands first, or hardest. The countries most exposed to this fertilizer disruption are the ones that import most of what they use. India imports 18% of all globally traded urea. Brazil imports 10%. East African farmers were already struggling to afford fertilizer before the crisis began. Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, countries where food is already a larger share of household income, face the steepest price increases. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has warned that if the strait remains disrupted through the spring planting season, the world is looking at a food crisis comparable to the one that followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and possibly worse, because this time, fertilizer producers outside the Gulf also lack key ingredients. Russia has suspended exports of ammonium nitrate to preserve its own supplies. China has blocked phosphate exports. The result is what economists call a perfect storm, and what farmers in East Africa are already calling something much shorter and uglier. And then there is the human story almost no one in Western media is covering. Roughly 1 in every 4 merchant seafarers on Earth is Filipino. About 250,000 of them work on the kinds of cargo ships that move oil, gas, and fertilizer through the world's choke points. When Iran began enforcing its blockade, these were among the people stranded. Filipino sailors on Greek-owned tankers carrying Qatari fertilizer to Indian farms. On April 2nd, after weeks of negotiations, Iran agreed to allow Philippine-flagged vessels and Filipino seafarers to cross the strait safely. Think about what that means. The fact that this needed to be negotiated, separately, by name, for one specific nationality of worker, tells you everything about how globalization actually works in the 21st century. I am Filipino. My family is from a country that does not produce most of its own fertilizer. The food on the table I grew up around, the rice, the meat, the vegetables, was made possible by a global system in which Filipino sailors carried Gulf chemicals to Asian fields, and almost nobody noticed it was happening. Until it stopped. The thing about the Strait of Hormuz is that the people who run global supply chains have known about it for decades. It appears on every list of the world's critical maritime choke points, alongside the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, the Bosphorus, and the Strait of Malacca. We talk about it in graduate seminars. The Pentagon war games it. And we have done almost nothing about it. There are two pipelines that bypass the strait, one Saudi, one Emirati. Together, they carry less than half the volume that normally moves through Hormuz. And they only carry oil, not gas, not fertilizer, not the things that quietly keep 8 billion people alive. Why? Because building infrastructure that exists just in case is expensive. And globalized supply chains have been engineered for the opposite of that. They are engineered for efficiency, for the cheapest possible cost during normal times, for just in time, not just in case. Which works beautifully until normal times end. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Every supply chain professional I know has been waiting for this. Not Hormuz specifically, though that was on the list, but something like it. The 2021 Suez blockage was a 6-day rehearsal. The 2022 Ukraine war was a fertilizer rehearsal. COVID was a labor and logistics rehearsal. Hormuz 2026 is the test we've been studying for. And the world is, predictably, failing it. Whatever happens next with the Strait of Hormuz, whether it reopened weeks ago or remains disrupted as you watch this, the consequences of what happened in those 46 days are already on their way to you. The fertilizer that should have been on Iowa fields in March is not getting there in time. The corn that should have been planted is being replaced with soybeans, or nothing at all. The cattle that should have been fed cheap corn next winter will be fed expensive corn instead. And the cost of that, the cost of one choke point half a world away being closed for 6.5 weeks, will sit on your grocery receipt for at least a year. That is what this channel is going to do, video after video. The news will tell you what happened. We are going to tell you what it means. For the food you eat, the work you do, the money you save, and the freedom you have to do any of those things at all. Because the world doesn't move in headlines, it moves in cargo. And the cargo is always headed somewhere, usually toward you. So the next time someone tells you that what happens in a narrow stretch of water on the other side of the world has nothing to do with your life, that geopolitics is for the news and groceries are for you, remember that tanker. Remember that it sat there for 46 days. Remember what it was supposed to become. And then look at your dinner. Cargo Cult covers current events through the lens of supply chains and global systems, going past the headlines to the consequences quietly reshaping your daily life. If that sounds like the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. New videos monthly.